Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and now that my two obligatory informative videos are done for the day. Now some of you guys might say if I put this one up early, but you only did one informative. Well, actually I put my training footage up last night after the current events, and I might have to do that more days just to get this knocked out and get that rotated through, but that means it should always be two videos between it, hopefully. Something like that roughly. Who cares though, right? Let's get to those current events. Let's put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about the Boogs. Eric Bugenhagen knocked out a pretty good video today. Now, as most of you know, even though he has done some partials and some other things, I still actually like Bugenhagen. I think he's a good athlete. I think he's a good coach. I think he's got a well-rounded training philosophy for advanced lifters. I think a lot of you novices, a lot of the stuff he talks about is way outside of what you guys need to be doing, but he does talk a little bit towards the novices. As long as people kind of separate that, I think his stuff's good. I agree with probably, what did I say before? I listened to about an hour and a half of his footage a few months back, last year or something. I agree with about 80 to 90% of what the guy says. I think he's a pretty knowledgeable dude. And he kind of jumped in and harped on the partials, and I think he did so because he feels like it's been completely bastardized. And he says all these partials are pretty much becoming a meme of the fitness industry. They've turned into a joke. He doesn't like it, and it's because he's promoted odd lifts. And all these odd lifts have been turned into partials, and that's not what he's about. Now, he did talk about that all these exercises, these odd lifts have uses, that most lifts have uses as long as it's not a bunch of fluff and pump and machines. He stole one of my terms. That means the Boog has been watching me on the lowdown. I know, brother. A lot of these other channels admit that. They let stuff slip here and there. That, yeah, they actually do watch me. But I'm not a popular guy. I'm controversial. A lot of people don't want to admit that. They don't want the hate because, you know, they say something nice about me. Man, I agree with something Blaha said. A bunch of trolls show up and they spam their comments, spam them with dislikes, and people panic. They freak out. But let me explain how this works, guys. That doesn't hurt your channel. You actually make money when they do that. Okay, let me explain that again, because YouTube explained this to me when I contacted them about all the dislike bots and the dislike campaign. They're like, no, you do know you're going to make more money if a bunch of people come in and you get 1,000 dislikes on a video. We're going to pay you more. So don't worry about it, guys. You're going to make that money. Don't be afraid to mention me. Don't be afraid, baby. It's all good. You're going to get paid. You're going to get paid. Even if you get 1,000 or 2,000 dislikes from the trolls, you're going to be stacking paper. Don't be afraid. In fact, their comments, you can make more money for that too. Just ban them and their comments still get counted. Even the banned trolls, see, their comments still get counted. You get paid, brother. You get paid for that. Don't be afraid of it. That line in your pocket. So go ahead and just say my name, guys. But on to the point. On to the point. Keep a straight face here. I got to be serious, guys. This is a serious topic. We're talking about partials. You know, I don't have a problem with the odd lifts. That's where people get these funny ideas that I'm like, oh, Jason only cares about the squat, bench, and deadlift. No, all big barbell movements, all weighted body weight movements, if they have an effective range of motion, are good exercises. Pull-ups are great. Chin-ups are great. Dips are great. Standing presses are great. Push presses are great. You know what? I don't even have a problem with someone going in and spending some time doing a behind the back deadlift. I only have a problem when someone pulls a 700-pound behind the back deadlift and claims that that's better than a 600-pound conventional deadlift. Because it's not. It's not harder. All right? From purely an effort perspective, a biomechanics perspective, 700 pounds behind the back is easier than 600 pounds conventional. It's not as impressive of a feat of strength. That's my only problem when people start throwing that stuff out there with the odd lifts. I don't have a problem with the odd lifts. You know, if a person wants to use a behind the back deadlift who's already built a little bit of a base with the basics, they want to do a behind the back deadlift or a Jefferson deadlift, knock it out. Spend 6 weeks progressing on it, 12 weeks progressing on it, and then rotate something else in. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that actually breaks through plateaus. I think a little bit of exercise variation, when you stagnated on the 6 or 7 lifts that you focus on all the time, a little bit of exercise variation breaks through plateaus. But then we come to the point to where he's like, look, these partials, the way people are doing it has become a joke. He's like, I experimented with partials for progressive range of motion. I wanted to see how it works. And that's not a novel concept. I'll jump to that in a minute. But, but he's like, I think partials help break through plateaus. I really don't. I don't think they do. Not for people who are raw, not for people who are trying to build muscle. Like if your goal is to either build maximal muscle or increase your raw lifts, like your raw squat, bench press, deadlift, overhead press, I think partials, I don't think they're that good for breaking through plateaus. And again, it comes down to what Eric said about specificity of training. See, that's a point where I'll disagree with Eric on. I agree with 90% of what the guy says there. I don't think they're worth a shit for breaking through plateaus. How could they? You're skipping the hard part. You're skipping the part of the exercise you need to work on more, which is usually the bottom. It's usually where the most mechanical tension is put on the muscles that you're trying to make stronger. Skipping, that's not going to make you stronger. Now, is it because there's some exercise variation, though? And I'll say, yeah, hell yeah. But by that same token, instead of doing a partial, I think, for someone, let's say you're doing a conventional deadlift and you need an exercise variation because you've been stagnant and you're regressing. I don't think a rack pull above the knee is the way to go. I don't think it's going to carry over at all. I think you're going to get weaker on your deadlift. If you spend 6 weeks doing that and you don't do your regular deadlift, I think your deadlift will go down. You're going to lose 20 pounds on it. I think you could rotate in a behind the back, a Jefferson, a hex bar, a full range of motion exercise, a deficit deadlift. I think if you do that, it'll help break through a plateau. A little bit of odd lifts are fine for that. They have a place for that. Partials don't. Partials aren't worth a shit. They're a waste of time. And they can't even put as much muscle on you. We have plenty of studies now showing that doing half reps, not even these little eighth reps people are doing, half reps build less muscle than full range of motion. Multiple studies show that. Most studies that measure it show that. A handful of studies show similar growth, but you have more studies that show less growth than the ones that show similar growth, and you don't have studies showing partials putting more muscle on you, not that I'm aware of. So no, for guys who are like, I want to get jacked, I'm going to overload the muscle. Well, the last thing you should ever do is a damn partial. Have you lost your mind? In what world is that going to help you get more jacked? It's not. It's not, unless you're on a bunch of drugs, in which case probably doesn't matter how you train. Everything's going to get you jacked, as long as you're training hard. Guys who aren't blasting a ton of gear, yeah, you might want to be doing some full range of motion exercises on every muscle that you want to grow and just avoid the partials. But we come back to that point. He doesn't like it because he's promoted the odd list, but now everyone associates the odd list because of guys like Strap On, guys like Nether Beast, all these other people following suit. They're now associating a rack pull with a 2-inch range of motion. And we all know that the way guys are doing it doesn't work. They're doing these Jefferson deadlifts with a 2-inch or a 4-inch range of motion instead of off the floor. And then, like he said, they're doing the partials with straps. That defeats the purpose. That's where partial pulls are useful. It's grip training. You're wearing straps. What's the point? What's the point? If you're trying to build all your muscles, go ahead and pull from the floor. Doing heavier stuff like that is good for grip training. Good for grip training. And they are valuable for that. But it's only because you're worried about working your grip. You're not going to get a stronger deadlift. You're not going to get bigger traps, bigger lats, bigger hamstrings, whatever you're trying to build by doing the partial. You're not going to grow those as much as you will a full range of motion. You won't. But it works the grip more because if you can lift 200 more pounds, you've got to hold 200 more pounds in your hands. All right, that makes sense. It's grip training. And that's where we agree. But the thing is, yeah, he had said that this is a case of a lot of this stuff, and like he mentioned Nether, he didn't say him by name, but he's like, yeah, Nether pretty much got called out for doing nothing but partials. And then when people said, well, how strong are you really? He found out he wasn't strong. He can't do anything. Because again, people have this weird idea that partials carry over. Now, Eric experimented with partials for progressive range of motion. You want to know where the first place documented in training is? I believe it was John Grimmick over 60 years ago. He was an old school strongman and weightlifter. He messed with this, right? He messed with this with insane poundage. This guy was massive and brutally strong. I mean, he was really fat because he ate a huge amount of food, And I don't mean fat like guys are saying, like fat like you, Jason. No, like 100 pounds of fat on me. But sometimes I'm probably exaggerating to get people take this stuff too literally. Yeah, he did progressive range of motion. He was famous for way back in the day. He had a tree in his backyard, right? And he had chains wrapped around this enormous oak tree, and he used to put a barbell in there with an insane amount of weight and overhead press it, right? And he started with a shorter range of motion, overhead pressing at the top, and over time he would bring a notch down in the chains. So he'd add an inch or two. And over the course of months, he would add an inch at a time on the range of motion with the really ultra heavy weight and try to get to the full range of motion strength. He would do the same thing with squatting inside of a hole. He dug a big pit in his backyard and would do partial squats and then fill it in with dirt over time so that when the plates hit the dirt on the side of the hole he was standing in, he would be raised up higher by adding more dirt to the pit over time. And doing that for progressive range of motion, I know that's kind of hardcore, but that's where it comes from. That's someone who is documented to have done it. Oftentimes it doesn't work as well as you would think, because what people think is that, okay, if I can do this partial overhead press with 400 pounds for 3 inches of range of motion, if I just add an inch a month, that it's going to build over. The problem is you won't. You're not going to go from that to the other, because you're going to end up with ultimately a 200-pound overhead press. So it's probably going to happen. So even with the progressive range of motion, it will not always keep pace. In other words, your 1 rep max or your 5 rep max with an 8th rep, you're never going to add progressive range of motion enough to where it's going to be a full rep. Now, could you do it with something much longer in range of motion? Could you take an exercise and do 2/3 of a rep and make this work over time? Yeah, you probably could. Probably could. But a lot of people do it on the opposite way. They'll do deficit deadlifts and then get to a normal deadlift. So they do the opposite. Oftentimes people do longer ranges of motion and then find ways to bring it into the normal exercise. And that works really, really well. But they also usually start adding weight as they go also. So that's something that also works as far as messing with range of motion as a form of progression. But it's really hit or miss, and it doesn't always work out as well as people like. In some cases it works great depending on how you train it. Other times it doesn't work. It's hit or miss. And I understand why some people experiment with things like that, because someone like Eric, he's an advanced athlete, elite athlete. He wants to try different things to test some things if he can break through a plateau with some new novel training stimulus. Most lifters aren't at the level to where they're going to ever need to do stuff like Eric does. He's experimenting because he's just trying to get to the next level as someone who's already an elite athlete, right? But for most of you, the conventional training, and that's what he points out, you need to get strong on the conventional lifts before you do this other stuff. That's where you build your base. And he's even said a lot of these partials, turns out they don't carry over. They don't carry over. So if you're trying to get stronger, the partials are going to make you stronger. Trying to get bigger, they put inferior size on you, so they're almost a waste of time. And they make you look like a douchebag, particularly when we're getting to the point where people are doing 2, 3, 4 inch range of motion exercises. Guys, it's not going to give you what you want. It's just a big circus act, and the internet's created it, and like he said, it's become a meme. And it's basically taken all these odd lifts that he wants to promote, and it's turned them into a meme. And he doesn't like it. It upsets him, and we know Strap-on is largely to blame for that, because he promoted it that other direction. And again, it just doesn't work that well. Whereas in Eric's over here doing mostly full range of motion. He messes with a little partials, but he does big lifts. But he still squats, he still benches, he still deadlifts. But he does these other odd lifts. He likes to do Zercher lifts, all right? He likes to do the Jefferson deadlifts, behind the back deadlifts. And, I get all that. I mean, he comes from a wrestling background. It's a contact sport. Some of these exercises are real useful for that. But you don't build your base with those. And that's something that he pointed out in that video. It's what I'll tell you guys, the same thing. You don't need to build your base with these odd lifts. Conventional lifts are conventional for a reason. They're conventional because they work. They're time proven to work in creating elite level athletes. And it's like people are so scared of doing conventional training now, that they're afraid almost to do these things. And even he pointed out, people have a hatred of the squat, bench, and deadlift sometimes. There's no need for that. They're great exercises. They will make you big and strong. Now, and like I would say, and he would tell you the same thing, guys, you probably do need to do those exercises if you want to be big and strong. You need to get good at them. But you don't want to get good at those exclusively, right? You want to train all your basic movement patterns. You want to make sure you're strong at your different joint angles and movement patterns that you're going to have. And you want to use big, complex barbell movement, weighted body weight exercises, big compound movements to get there. And that doesn't matter what your goals are, because that is the fastest way to get strong, and that is the fastest way to get big. All right, fluff and pump doesn't make you big. Fluff and pump makes guys on tons of gear big, but they have their own reasons for doing that. For the majority of you out there, not really the way to go. Do the big exercises. And it's almost like these odd lifts with extremely short ranges of motion, or all this accommodating resistance and chains and bands and slingshots that everyone is doing, is becoming the new fluff and pump. And at the end of the day, it isn't going to make most of you as big and as strong as you could be if you just build your base on the basic lifts. I have no problem with that. Even me doing my own Bulgarian training, I'm trying to get a lot better again. I'm trying to rebuild my strength to where it was, and maybe even past some of it. I won't ever be where I was at in my 20s again, but I can pass where I was in my 30s. I can do that. But it doesn't mean I'm not even going to incorporate some different lifts. You know why? Because sometimes we need these exercise variations to break through plateaus to get novel training stimulus. Right? We need them. They're beneficial. They're beneficial if you use them correctly. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.